Welcome to the Lesbian Romantic Podcast. This is Waking Up is Easy, Part 10. Now, this part of my story is hard to explain. I think that I still don't fully understand why I suddenly stopped being obsessed with Usha. For the first time since she had been brought to the center, I was not eager to be with her or even to think about her. This is strange, right? Almost as if a spell had been broken by what she had said. But that makes it sound too harsh, as if Usha was not spellbinding, because she was. She really was. She still is. I know this is probably not what you want to hear at this point. And it is definitely not what the movie portrayed, but this is what happened. For the first time in a long time, I turned to reality instead of to Usha. And my life was a mess. Audrey had left, and while I did not want to be in a romantic relationship with her anymore, I did want her close to me as a friend. My best friend. And now, we were totally disconnected. Literally and figuratively. Audrey tells me she tried to call me as soon as she saw the local news that night, but she couldn't get through to me anywhere. So, let's talk about that news broadcast. By the time Brittany had come back from buying 2 phones with new numbers, the first protesters had shown up. There was a police car in front of the center at that time, as promised. But there wasn't much the officers could do as long as the protesters stayed off private property. It was eerie how well these protesters knew what to do and what not to do. Ellie Hartkin, too, had known exactly where to park her van. This was no coincidence at all, of course. I looked at the protesters from between my office blinds and saw the placards and signs about Usha. I wasn't even sure what they were supposed to mean, to be honest. You know, maybe that was part of why I stopped being obsessed with Usha. I've always been sensitive to what company I am in. Now, this new Obsessed with Usha club did not look all that appealing to me. And just to be clear, this wasn't like earlier when I pretended not to think about Usha. This really was different, and it was much needed. I can't imagine where I'd be today if I hadn't finally woken up. But back to the protesters for a moment. The first reporter stepped onto the scene just 2 hours after the protesters had arrived. It was only the local news at that point, but it still felt like a violation to me. Remember what I said about Maya sensing the storm way before me? I think she knew deep down that if Usha woke up, weird things would happen. Maybe not as weird as they turned out, but still. Maya was so impressive that day. It only took her a few hours to calm down and start doing what she could to protect her staff and patients. I really admire her leadership that day. The police came to talk to me twice that afternoon. Once about Usha, but that was very short. I think Officer Grant decided I wouldn't tell him anything even if I did know something. The second time, another officer came to offer to check me into a hotel. I did not want to stay in a hotel, but the police and Maya insisted. I couldn't even go home just to pick up some stuff because someone might be following me. Apparently, there was a lot of chatter about me online, but they told me not to look at that. You'll be surprised to hear that I followed their advice. I knew it would only make things worse, and I had to trust Maya and the police to assess what was needed to keep me safe. So yeah, my best friend was gone. I no longer had my quiet job. I was locked out of my house, and I was locked out of my digital accounts. I was basically locked out of my life. And it was exactly what I needed. The police drove me to the hotel. I sat in the back of their car. Did you ever sit in the back of a police car? It's pretty weird. And I had to duck while we were driving by the protesters. I can tell you, it certainly added to the feeling of having bottomed out, even though I hadn't really done anything dramatic that day. It was just a feeling I had. This is rock bottom. I remember a time when I knew crucial phone numbers by heart. I still remember the landline number of my parents' house to this day. But not Audrey's number. Never Audrey's number. There was just never a reason. I always pressed the favorite contacts button on the screen, and there she was. All this to say, as soon as the police dropped me off, I was all by myself. You know that part of a movie when the hero is all but defeated? It's usually pretty far into the movie, just before the finale. It's that moment when you think all is lost. I always hate that moment. Well, I had a moment like that in the hotel. More than a few moments. I am no hero, of course, just to clarify. But I did look at myself long and hard that night, and I did not like what I saw. I had indeed been sleepwalking through my life. I had become a recluse in disguise, hiding at my job as a therapist for clients I almost never spoke. It's kind of hilarious when you think about it. I am not going to list all the mistakes I made over the years here. I think you already grasped the gist of most of them, and I'm sure you'll understand more and more as this story unfolds. What I do want to share today is that I woke up that night. Yes, I'm using Usha's words, but more importantly, I finally understood what Audrey had been trying to tell me for years. Isn't it funny how that goes? I'm sure many of you also have an ex who rolls their eyes because you've finally changed for the better after breaking up. Maybe that's the only way we humans can really change. By dying in some way or another, losing everything, and then resurrecting in a new form. I don't intend to sound religious here. I just have no other words to describe what I came to see. And I no longer want to hide who I've become because of seeing it. I locked myself up in a box for many years. And then the media, and you probably, also put me in a different box. Not to mention all the people online who put me in the craziest box of all. I guess that's how we navigate this world. By slicing things up until we can look at something or someone in a way that we can relate to, whether that is in opposition or accordance. But I am more than my box, the media's box and your box. That's the insight that started unfolding in me that night while I was locked up in that hotel room. Okay, enough of my dark night of the soul moment. Let's go back to where the action was. Not that I was able to leave the hotel, by the way. Apparently, nobody was picking me up the next morning. The police had just dropped me there to stay. Problem solved. So I finally did check the news and social media and found out more protesters had shown up at the center. There was also an extra van from a Maplewood City news outlet. More importantly, the police had released Ellie Harkin, she who shall not be named Crazy Goggles. Freedom Crusaders! It is clear that we have discovered something monstrous that the authorities want to keep secret at all costs. I just spent the night in prison after being arrested for absolutely no other reason than reporting. This was expected and prepared for, but we were still caught off guard by the speed with which the authorities moved in. Luckily, I can always count on my fellow crusaders. Thank you to the very generous crusader who hired a lawyer to get me out and bring me back here at the center to expose the experiments performed on innocent human beings. I was planning to gather more evidence and more testimony before going public all the way, but I see that I might have little time to do so before being arrested or worse, again. So, I will release the story of what has been happening at the Quiet Peace Coma Center. And it all starts with Mama's boy Arthur Adams and his rich and evil mother, Genevieve Pelletier. Chapter 8. The first few days after Usha's waking up laid the groundwork for what was to happen afterward. Several elements came together in a perfect storm. A storm that would quickly take over the entire country and possibly leave it forever changed. The first few days after Usha's waking up laid the groundwork for what was to happen afterward. Several elements came together in a perfect storm. A storm that would quickly take over the entire country and possibly leave it forever changed. I cannot proceed with this book without pausing at this turning point in the story. I want to take a moment to reflect on how each person contributed to creating a most intriguing mix that really almost warrants its own book. Let's start with Usha, who was found in a car wreck and was not expected to ever wake up again. But she did. Even more surprisingly, she seemed not to have any brain damage after waking up. However, she did only speak in riddles. Catherine Halifax, the therapist, had been obsessed with Usha long before Usha woke up. In many ways, you could say that it was this obsession that infected the first few people when Usha awoke, only then to be amplified. Ellie Harkin was a young and impulsive vlogger looking to save the world from evil while being blind to her own rage and paranoia. Ellie shared Usha's story, or her version of it, with her community and set off an unprecedented chain of events. But she did not do this alone. In many ways, we cannot blame Ellie for her role in this story. Ellie's funding came from a group of online activists, I'm being generous with this description, who had had their own agenda long before Ellie came onto the scene. Which brings me to the man only known as Hotdog Champion 2023, who we now know sent Ellie Harkin information and money to act upon that information. Maybe it would be more accurate to say that he actually sent Ellie instructions. While not yet discussed at this point in the book, but widely known by the public now, we have circumstantial evidence of the involvement of Genevieve Pelletier. It was not something she did, but Hotdog Champions 2023's obsession with her that brought even more volatile energy to this explosive mix. Then finally, we have the nurse Hope, who was Usha's first self-professed disciple. In awe of Usha's riddles, Hope started writing down what she called Usha's teachings. Her website quickly grew a massive following, adding the final ingredient. And so we have the players of this drama set up on stage. None of them could have brought about these remarkable events alone. All of them were needed to start a series of developments that cast a spell on a whole country. Usha's spell. And yet, I would say it was not Usha who was looking to bind us with her spell, but we who were longing to be spellbound. Life event by Freedom Crusaders channel goes live in 6 hours and 43 minutes. This was part 10 of Waking Up is Easy. Thank you to all the supporters of this podcast. I was able to write, record, and produce this episode with your help. And supporters do get access to the latest episodes first. Also, whenever I produce an extra, like a short story or an extra scene, that is exclusive to supporters as well. I've got a whole archive of extra scenes and a few short stories, and I hope to start working on another short story very soon. You can become a supporter, a theater friend, today if you go to patreon.com/lesbianromantic. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you soon.